Welcome to next class everyone. Today we're going to be doing the creases and I will show you how to make soft 3D looking creases. I'm also going to start with the preliminary lip layers and I will show you those next. So what you're going to need is your ramekin, a nice clean ramekin, your lip, blush and nail Bountiful Baby premix paint, your red mixing brush, and a relatively, this is a size 0 brush, something that's round and tapered and holds its point quite well. You don't want it too thin, but you don't want it outrageously thick either, so a 0 or a 00 or something along those lines would be perfect for this job. And of course you're going to need your thinner. So we're going to go ahead and mix some more paints. So I'm going to add probably 2 pipettes of thinner, so about 5 or 6 milliliters. We're going to go in with our mixing brush and get it wet a little bit, and go into your pot and just pick up a brush load of paint, same as before really, not much difference, and then just go ahead and mix that into your thinner. Just give that a good mix. Now because we're going into creases, we're going to be making slightly thicker paint than what we've been doing for the wash layers. So you're probably going to be about 3 brush loads for 2 pipettes, so 5 ml of thinner. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix that in really well. You want to make sure there's no streaks in the paint and that it's nice and mixed. You also don't want to see any like bits and bobs in your paint pot, because that's usually concentrated paint, and when you get that on vinyl it will stain quite easily. So you have to be very, very vigilant and make sure that you've got all your parts mixed. I need a little bit more. Mix that in again. So we're beginning to get thicker paint now. You can see here it's a lot thicker. You can see how it's running off the brush, and you can see a lot more colour there. Now, because we're doing veining, I'm also going to use your veined purple as well. I'm just going to add a touch of this just to darken this up, because the creases are obviously darker, so this will just help with that. So I'm going to go and just lift up about a brush load of purple, you can see here, and just mix that in to the red. Make sure it's nice and mixed, and that's just darkened it up a little bit. You don't want to go too purple, although I am going to actually add a little bit more purple in. About another brush load, and we'll just see where that takes us. I think that's about right now. So it's just darkened it a little bit, and it's taken a little bit of the warmth out, and it just helps. And it will give you a lot more help with the depth. So that's nice and thick. You can see it leaves a nice coating to the ramekin when you move it around. And it coming off the brush, when it comes off the brush you can see it holds its colour nicely as it runs down. Okay, so she's cooled down now, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take one piece of vinyl at the time, so the head and then the arm and then so on, and I'm going to do 3 or 4 creasing layers. I find I'm doing it this way because it helps me see some progress, because this is a very, very long stretched out progress where there's not really too much of a difference to see, because it's building and building layers. So I'm going to go and work on one piece, because then I can see it progressing, quicker than if I was to do all 5 pieces and keep going with those layers, because we're sticking with one colour of paint, we're not changing anything, so it's nice to just do one piece at a time. So I always start with the head, just my preference. You can start with any piece you like, and I'm going to go and mix the same paint as we had before, just remix it because it was getting separated. So what we're going to do, instead of doing one layer and setting it in the oven, I'm going to start using my heat gun. Now this is just your any crafter's heat tool. It's used for card making and all sorts of things. This one has 2 settings. There's no heat settings on it, it's one heat, but there's 2 powers. So there's a gentle and then there's a full blast. I use it on full blast. This is a 230 volt or 50 hertz and a 300 watt heater. Don't use this for any kind of large areas of vinyl. I only use this for the creases and the small areas, or if I'm force drying, but I won't use it for curing. If I'm curing, like we have been doing in the past few layers, I will use the halogen oven, but for now this is perfect. So I'm going to just move my limbs out the way so I have a little bit more space. So I'm going to be working on the head. We've seen where we're going to be creasing, so in the bags of the eyes, in the eyelid area, so the creases of the eyelids, around the nostrils, in the nostrils, the little angel's bow in the centre of the top lip, above here, and we're going to be doing all the little creases around the neck, in the ears, behind the ears, the fontanelle, and that is all we'll be doing for now. Oh, I beg your pardon, we've also got the little creases around the base of the bottom lip. Put some on my brush. So we're still working on the eye area, so I'm going to brush right over the little creases that are in the centre here, and then I'm going to just sort of bring it up onto the eyelid a little bit, like so, leaving the bottom lid alone. I'm just working on the top at the moment. And then just pounce with your sponge, make sure there's no excess, and move on to the next one. Like so. And again, just give that a little pounce. And then we're going to go in with our heat gun and partially set this so we can put the next layer on top. So my heat gun here. And then that's set enough there that we can move on to our next layer. So I'm just going to long brush. Do that again. Set. Again. I'm just going to keep doing this until I'm happy with the colour. It's not going to be the complete colour, this is just the base layers that we're doing here. So I'm just pulling that paint up a little bit higher on her brow. So I just feel like it's too concentrated in the middle, so I'm just going to bring it up a little bit with my sponge by pulling the paint across the vinyl. But this is just the first section. It's the base layers, like we've done with the colouring and all the wash layers. This is just setting the foundations, and we'll go back and darken it and detail it later. So I'm just going to set that again. There's a couple of fluffy bits in there, so I'm just going to use my brush to remove any of the fluff that's in the little creases. And then I'm going to do that again. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just pulling my brush up into the up the head, up the eyelid, because then it gives us a nice jagged, uneven edge at the top. You don't want just one line because you look like they've had eyeshadow put on. So I'm lifting my brush up, it's giving me a nice jagged edge on the side there, and then I can just pounce with my sponge. I don't need to drag anything there, because that's the reason I dragged earlier, because I felt like it was beginning to look a bit like eyeshadow. So bring your brush against the centre and then just lift it up like so. So it's nice and jagged edge, and then pounce with your sponge like so. And then I'm going to heat set that. And then I'm going to leave the eyes for now, and I'm going to move on to the nose. I like to try and keep them balanced. So around about the same amount of layers and amount of time that's gone into each sort of crease before I go back, because I don't want to finish these creases and not have started any others, because I'll struggle to get the colours the same. So I usually do about 4 or 5 layers on each crease, and then we'll move on to the next one. So we're going to move on to the nose now. So again, like before, you want to lay your brush on the fat roll here. So your brush will be laying on the fat roll like this and pointing into the nose. And you're going to start at the top and just bring and follow the line around. Bring it down and then just circle the nostril, or inside the nostril even, like so. I'm just going to bring that back up and back down. Give a little bit more paint on my brush because I don't think I have enough here. Like so, and then I'm just going to bring it across in between the two nostrils where the nose meets the top lip, just to give that a little bit of depth. And then the angel's touch as well, so just pull your brush through the little gap between the on the top lip. And then I'm going to do the same with the other side. Again, laying your brush against the fat roll and just bring it around and down, and then into the nostril. So give this nostril a little circle there. And then with my sponge I'm just going to pull the paint out ever so slightly, just feather the edges so there's no harsh lines. You don't want to take too much paint away. If you have the right consistency of paint and the right amount on your brush, so your paint consistency is something like this. It's thicker than the wash layers, but it's not overly thick. You can still, you know, it's still translucent. And as I showed you before, on your brush, you want to load your brush, take it off, it drips, take it off, it still drips, take it off. That's almost there, so I probably use that brush, but you want it so there's no drips on the edge. You see how it's dripping down, and then that one stays, so that'll be enough on your brush, because you don't want too much that you can't control it and it runs in places you don't want. So that's a perfect amount on your brush. And we didn't heat set that. So I'm just going to go ahead and heat set that like we did with the eyes. Like so. Just checking that was all okay. So again with your brush, just load it until it sticks at the top of the ramekin. And again we're going to go from the top of the nostril down, top of the nose even, down into the nostril. Bringing it across between the nostrils and into the other one. And paint the angel's touch. Reload my brush. Move around to the other nostril, again brush against the fat roll rather than the nose, and bring it right around. so you're not actually putting any paint on the nose, it's all on the vinyl around it. You want to make sure that you've not got any harsh lines around the nose area. You want this to be a area sort of shading rather than drawing a line. Like when you're drawing a portrait or something, once you've got the outline there, you want to shade to add like sort of the shape on the paper and things like that. This is what we're doing at the moment. So I've just pounced that out with my brush, or feathered it out with my sponge even, and I'm just going to heat set again. Okey-dokey. Just bringing it closer to me just to double check everything. Again, my paint has started to separate, so I'm just mixing my paint in. Now, with the consistency, with the amount that you have on your brush, so you load your brush and then you wipe it on the side, see how it drips down? You wipe it again, it still drips down. You wipe it again, it sits on the top of the ramekin, it doesn't drip down. That's the right amount of paint to have on your brush when you're doing the crease work. Because you don't want too much on your brush so that it runs all over in the little places that you don't want it to go into, but you want enough that it actually covers where you want it to cover, so that's a good amount to have on your brush. Okay, so I'm just going to do this a couple more times, but this time I'm going to, instead of pulling it out quite as much, I'm going to focus more in the crease, so it's closer to drawing a line than it was before. We're not shading as much, but we are still shading here. It's not an exact line, we're just bringing it closer to doing a line. So I'll show you what I mean. So I have my paint on my brush, and instead of laying it flat against the fat roll, I'm going to point it into the crease, like so. So we're painting more, we're still not painting the nose, but we're not painting the fat roll either. We've got that shade in now. We're going to deepen the actual crease so there's more depth to it, so it's like a gradient here. So pointing into the crease, and just bring your brush around, and some more paint to your brush, and I'm going to leave the nostrils for now. We're going to do the same. I have to turn it upside down for this because I'm left-handed. Same for this one. Point into the crease and bring it around the nostril, the side of the nose even. I'm going to do the same for in between the nostrils as well. I'm just going to take my sponge and just lightly make sure there's no paint pooling in the creases, and I'm going to heat set that. Doesn't take too much because we haven't put too much paint on. Okay, mix my paints up again. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing again. Pointing into the crease, bring your brush around. Pointing into the crease, and bring your brush around. Same between the nostrils. Just make sure there's no paint still, excess paint still hiding there. My sponge, and we are ready for heat setting again. Okay, so we're about the same stage as we are with the eyes and the nose now, so I'm going to leave that be. I'm going to move on to the next section, so I'm just going to move on to below the lips. We're still leaving the lips alone, that's a separate section altogether. So I'm just going to load my brush up again, and again this is more a shading area rather than a line, so I'm going to make sure you've got the right amount on your brush and just paint the little dips that are there. So make sure you've got your brush in all the areas and just move it around so it's not a single line. It's just following the dents in the vinyl. And then I'm going to go back in with my sponge and just pounce out. Now, because we used the matte varnish at the very beginning as our first layer, it gives a nice surface. Because it was so thin, we don't have, the vinyl is still smooth to the touch. There's no roughness to it. If there's a roughness to it, it's too heavy. But because we had it nice and thin, the vinyl is nice and smooth. So the paint's not going to look grainy when you add the colour on top, but it will allow the colour to feel as though it's seeping into the vinyl, like the vinyl is drawing in the colour, which is perfect for what we need. If that is what's happening, then you have done everything absolutely perfect. If it's not, don't despair, it's not the end of the world, but this does help a lot when I'm doing my kit work. So you can see here it's just absorbed the paint into it very nicely. Now some kits will do this on their own. The head vinyl is usually slightly different to the limb vinyl. The limb vinyl will have more silicone content in it than the head vinyl, because they want to be softer when you're holding them. But so the head has more chance of absorbing the paint into it. But there is quite a lot of oils that are left on by the factory. It's a releasing agent to get the pieces out of the mould, especially around the corners, so the backs of the legs and sort of in like the elbow area and under the chin, you know, just in little creases, just to help the kit come out of the mould. So you just need the matte varnish just helps combat those oils, because even though we are painting with oiled paints, the oils that are left on the vinyl are a lot denser than the oils we are painting with. We have very fine refined oils that we're using, so just having the matte varnish over the top of it really helps to disperse the other oils that we've already washed the majority of them off, but there'll still be a little bit left, and it just helps with the paint sort of sitting nicely on the vinyl. Instead of sitting on top of the vinyl, the matte varnish allows it to sink into the vinyl. That's why I like to do the matte varnish layer, but you don't have to do the layer. If it's not for you, then that's totally fine. A lot of artists don't use the layer, so you know, just find what works for you. So we're going to go back and do another couple of layers on there. So just go into the corner, same as before. Like so. And just pounce out with my sponge. Now I don't feel like I'm getting into the corners of the mouth very well with my sponge, so I'm just going to go ahead and use my dry brush just to spread the paint out of the little mouth creases here, like so. So you can see that's given it a little bit of colour to it, like so. So I don't think I'm going to use quite as much, because these aren't meant to be as deep as the lines of the nose in real life. So I'm not going to use as many layers on this section as I would do on the rest of the creases. So I think that's just about enough. So that's 2 layers that I've done there, plus the layer we did before when we were doing the whole kit. So that's about enough for me. It looks as though it ties in quite well, so I'm just going to go heat set that and we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, nice and quick. So I'm just going to move on to the ears now. So I'll start with one ear here. So again, with the fork, you want to bring your paint into the fork of the ear here, like so. And then in the base of the ear, right here, you want to put your paint in here as well. And you want to line the vertical wall of the ear. So this section here, you want to line that as well with the paint. Go right down into the base where the ear canal would be on a real baby. And then from the lobe, I'll just follow the outside line around the ear with my brush, like that. And just pounce off any excess with your sponge that you can get to, and then pick up your brush, because we can't get in there with our sponge, so pick up your dry brush and just feather out any paint that's left in the vinyl, and the little creases that you can't get to with your brush, your sponging. Okay, so that's the first layer done, so I'm going to heat set that now. And then I'm going to move on and do the same thing again. So in the fork, right down to the edge, in the base of the ear, around the vertical wall, down into where the ear canal is, and then from the lobe, just follow the outside line around the ear. Okay, so we're going to do another layer in the ear now. Same as before, with your paint. So you want to go into the fork and on the base of the ear, up the vertical wall. So, and follow from the lobe, follow the ear outer line all the way around, past the fork and into the base. Pounce the excess off with your sponge, bring in your brush and just feather everything out and pull any excess off that you can't reach with your sponge. And then we're going to heat set that one as well. Now the ear has a lot of different dimensions, so you have to be very careful. You can't just point your heat gun at your ear. Like, you can't just point it straight on, because the higher sections, you want to be drying the lower sections of the ear, but the higher sections here will catch the heat first and are closer to the heat gun, so they are very, very prone to getting shiny. So you want to move your heat gun around and try and get into all the little creases separately with your heat gun. Don't leave it still at all when you're heat setting the ear. You don't want to leave it too close to the vinyl, and you don't want to leave it on one section for too long, because you do not want the ear going shiny. So just bear that in mind when you're doing that. Okay, so we're going to do another layer on the ear. So again, starting with the base or the fork or something like that. Go all around, right down into the ear canal, up and around on the vertical wall, into the fork area here, and then from the lobe of the ear, follow the line right around, past the fork and into the base of the ear. Use your sponge again to just pounce out any excess that you can get to, and then bring along your dry brush, feather out all the harsh edges and pick up any excess paint that you can't reach with your sponge. And that's another layer done on your ear. So I'm just going to say, I tend to have a relatively clean sponge, and I'm just going to follow the outer edge of the fork here, the very, very tip of the fork around here. And I'm just going to follow that with my sponge, and I'm just going to dry off or rub off any red paint that's across there, because if you look at newborn babies, they tend to have quite yellow, very colourless forks in the ear. So I'm just rubbing any excess off. It also helps the creases look a lot more, have a lot more depth to them, because you can lift out any excess you wish in the fork of the ear. So now I've done that, I'm going to heat set again. Now I think we've got quite a lot of layers in there compared to what we're doing on the front, so I think that's about right for what we've done. We're about on the right level, so I'm going to leave that there for now and move on to the other ear. Just going to mix my paints again. Okay, and again you can see a big difference here compared to this ear. Just those couple of layers makes a massive difference, you see. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on here. So again with the fork here, just want to paint there. Exactly the same as the other side, just in the opposite way. So in the base, up the vertical wall, and then follow from the lobe around the outside crease. Right down past the fork and into the base. Now with the lobe, you kind of want to draw a circle in a way, or an oval with your brush, because that just gives it a little bit more contouring, and it looks a little bit softer once you're finished. So instead of just drawing a line, you want to draw a circle at the bottom and then follow the line around. Some kits have the little dent and contouring sculpted in. Some of them don't. Some have a very flat lobe of the ear. Personally, I like to add a little contouring, so I always draw a little circle and then move around the ear with my brush. Just a personal preference. Okay, so I'm going to go back in with my brush even, and just feather everything out and make sure that there's no creases, no excess in the vinyl. I'm just bringing my brush and my sponge around the fork of the ear, and then I'm going to go in and heat set my paint. Okay, and that's that done. So we're going to do the same again, another layer, the fork of the ear, around the base of the ear, down into the ear canal, up the vertical wall, draw a little circle and follow the line around past the fork and into the base. Use your sponge to pounce off any accessible excess, and bring your dry brush through and feather everything out and pick up any excess your sponge cannot reach. Take your dry sponge and just rub it across the fork of the ear. Then we're ready for heat setting again. To mix my paints. Okay. And then another layer, same again, in the fork, in the base of the ear and up the vertical wall, down into the ear canal, reload, draw a little circle and follow the ear up and around past the fork and into the base. Use your sponge to pounce out the excess. Bring in your dry brush and feather everything out. And just pull your dry sponge over the fork and heat set once more. Okay, so we've got a couple of layers left on here now. So just mix my paints again. So into the fork, into the base, into the ear canal and around the vertical wall. Reload, draw a little circle and follow the line past the fork and into the base. Use your sponge to pounce off any excess. Bring in your dry brush to feather everything out. Pull your dry sponge across the top of the fork very gently and heat set again. And then I'm going to use one more layer, so again into the fork, into the base, down into the ear canal, up around the vertical wall, reload, draw a little circle, up, around, past the fork and down into the base. Use your sponge to pounce out any excess. Use your dry brush to feather everything out. And this time I'm just going to leave, I'm not going to bother with this because it's looking whiter than the other side, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Okay, I think we're about there, so I'm just going to heat set that layer. Okay, so we're about the same on both sides now. So that's the ears done for now. So we're just going to move on and do all the little creases around the neck. So same paint, same technique. Lift your, fill your brush and just follow the lines. Just go over with your sponge. I'm going to do one line at a time here. So, heat set. And then follow the line again. Now this time I'm going to, instead of just following the line, I'm going to line my paintbrush against the fat roll on each side and create an arch. You see how I created an arch there? See if we can get the light to shine on it. Not really. So just lift your brush up and over and into an arch shape around, like a pair of lips. And I just pounce that out with my sponge, and I'm going to heat set that again. Like so. If your vinyl feels a little bit too hot to the touch, then move on to something else and come back, because you don't want to be painting on very hot vinyl, because you'll have no time to feather any harsh lines out or take the excess off before it starts to dry and set in. So you just want to be nice and careful with that. So again, just roll your brush through the line. And so I'm not going to do the arch on this one, just bounce it through. The arch is just for more contouring to help it look more like a roll as well. I think I'm about there for that crease at the moment, so I'm going to move on to the next one. And again, just pulling my brush right the way through, around it, and pouncing out with my sponge. Heat set. Do the same thing again. Sponge, pounce the excess off, and heat set. And draw a line with your brush. Use your sponge to pounce off the excess, and heat set. Check it's not too hot. Draw a line. And this line's gone over and into the fat roll. It's not just in the crease here, so you can see how my brush is spreading out there and around the vinyl, so it just helps with the contouring a little bit more. So I'm just going to pounce that out. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, just going to reload my brush a little bit. So it spreads out over the fat roll and above. Just pounce that out and heat set. Okay. I'm going to do one more layer with that and then we're done with that roll. So roll across like so, and pounce the excess off, heat set, and that's that crease done. So we'll move on to the next one now. Now there's two that are very, very close together, so I'm actually going to do both of those creases at the same time because they are so close in proximity. Just mix my paints again because they're settling a little bit. So I'm just going to, same thing again, just run your brush through the crease and do that to both of the creases here. Okay, and then use your sponge to just pounce out the excess. So, and heat set that. Same thing again, and pounce that out. Heat set. Same thing again, you brush through, pounce out the excess, and heat set. I'm going to do one more layer on that. Pull your brush through and around, and both. Pounce out the excess. And heat set that one as well. Okay, so that's everything on the front of the chin, so I'm going to move around the back because this kit has quite a lot of wrinkles in the back. If your kit doesn't have the wrinkles in the back, then obviously you don't need to do any of this part. We're also going to look at the little dent that some kits have in the back of the neck as well, where the spine usually connects to the base of the skull on a real baby. And with that, I'm just going to take my brush, my big mixing brush, and just shade a big area in there. And I'm just going to pounce that out with my sponge, like so, and heat set that. And do that again. And heat set. And I'm going to leave it at that because that's giving it a nice depth and contouring there. Okay, I'm just going to mix my paints again because they have settled. Okay, so I'm going to start with the bottom crease here, no particular reason. Just pull my brush through there and pounce out with my sponge. Do the same again. With this layer, I'm just going to go a little bit outside of the crease like we did before. Just onto the fat roll a little bit on both sides. Not much, just a little. Just gives a smoother gradient into the crease. So I'm going to heat set that. Doing the same thing on the fat roll here. Just bringing a little bit outside of the crease, not much. And pass that out. And heat set. Same again, and just pounce out any excess and heat set. And that's that done for that crease. Can you see how that's a lot darker than these creases on the top, which you can't really see compared to it? It's almost as dark as the neck ring crease, so it shows we're doing good work here. So there we go. Let's move on to all the little creases. Now there's lots of little creases that are all in the same proximity, so they're quite short, so I'm just going to go and do all of them at the same time. And pounce it out. And heat set. And probably do one more layer, because these are quite delicate creases that don't have a lot of contouring in the sculpting. I'm barely pressing down with my brush, so we get a nice thin line that doesn't go too far outside of the crease. And just heat set. There we go, can you see? That's darkened them a little bit. So we're going to move around and do the ones at the back of the neck here. and heat set. And again. And heat set. Pounce them out and heat set. And then we've got one more around here that I'm going to do individually. And this is more of a shading area than a crease. So I'm going to use a lot fatter and more pressure on my brush. I'm going to do one more layer on that. Now all we have left to do is behind the ears, so I'm going to use my brush again. Same thing, just going to mix my paints. Same thing as before, and just another crease. So from the base of the lobe all the way around the back and up onto the top. Now with this I tend to lie my brush on the head rather than against the ear, and paint more of behind the ear than on the ear. So can you see how I'm placing my brush behind on the vinyl and brushing around like so. And I will pounce the excess off of that. And I can't get into that with my sponge, so I'm just going to use my brush. And then I'll heat set that. Do it all again. And pounce that out. And heat set. Now I'm going to move on and touch the ear, so I have my brush against the ear rather than the head vinyl here. And pounce off the excess. Just go in with my brush into the corner there. And heat set. Now I'm pointing my brush into the crease. I'm not laying it against either side. And then heat setting. Can you see the difference between the two ears? This one has the creasing, this one does not. Makes a big difference. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same on the other ear now. Holding my brush against the head vinyl rather than the ear for the first layer. and just use my brush to get into the lobe area. And then make sure you've got all the paint out. And heat set. Same again. Heat set. Now I'm going to move my brush so it's lying against the ear rather than the head, so opposite of what we've done. Like so. So you're painting the back of the ear. And the same again. It all out and heat set. Now I'm going to point my brush into the crease rather than lying it on either side. And pounce off the excess. Heat set. Heat set. Okay, so we have all the creases in the head done to the degree I would like. So you can see that there. So that's the creases for the head done, and I'm going to go ahead and do it all for all the limbs in all the little creases. This stage takes a while. There's lots on, especially on the detail kits like Laura Lee's. It's there's a lots and lots and lots of creases to shade. So this stage takes a while. So just be patient with it. You'll get there eventually. If you feel you're getting frustrated or annoyed or you feel like you're rushing, leave it. Take a break. 5-10 minute break, longer if you need it, and do something completely different. You know, cook, go for a walk, you know, anything that's totally different, it doesn't matter. And then come back to it when your mind's refreshed, you have a fresh eye, and then keep going. Because I do find myself with this layer, I do get a bit frustrated that I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again, and I don't seem to be getting anywhere. So you just have to be patient with this layer. You'll get there eventually. Okay, so we are back with the leg, and I'm going to start with the sole of the foot here. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. Same paint, same brushes, same everything. And I'm just going to do some creasing on the base of the foot. So there's a big line down the middle. That's usually where I start. And I just bring my paint down that line and blemish that off. Trying to get this in a place where you can see. There we go, that's good. Okay, so I just pounce that off, and I'm going to follow down and just do some more creasing around the little tiny little skin texture ones on the side, like so. Nothing too heavy. just going to stick to the sole of the foot. We're not going to go too high up into the front of the foot here. So just pounce off the excess on them, and then we'll be heat set those as well. Okay, second layer now. Do some more on these side ones here. Just blemish those off with your sponge. Make sure there's nothing trapped in the little creases at the top, and then we'll be heat setting those. Okay, and go again. Going around all the little creases and just pouncing those off, and then we'll heat set that. Just pounce the excess off of that as well. And heat set once more. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep it towards the same tone as the hand, so we've still got a little way to go. And then just blemish that off. Make sure there's no paint stuck in the creases, and we'll heat set that again. Okay. Right, I'm probably going to do one more layer on there, and then we'll move on to the toes. And blemish. And then just the little creases down the side, up the top here, like so, and down onto the heel, up, down, around here there's a couple of creases, and then up in between the big toe and the second toe, and then we're just going to pounce all the excess off, and then heat set that. Going to do a couple more around here, which I don't think I got last time, so just heat set them a couple of times. There's just one here one crease here that I've missed. And once more. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the toes. So where we're going to put the creasing on the toes is we're going to go in between each toe, like this. And if the toes are separated, then just in between at the base. And then where the toe joins onto the foot, you want to draw a line around there on all 5 toes. It may be sculpted there, it may not. And then just pounce that off with your sponge, any excess that's been left. And then you want to go where the little round bit joins the line of the toe that goes down into the foot. You want to put your paint there as well. So you want to draw a line along here with your brush, and then remove any excess paint that has accumulated. If you cannot fit your sponge in, then find your dry brush again and just gently dab off any excess that you can see. And I've just realised I forgot to do the big toe. So I'm going to do the big toe as well, and just pounce off the excess with your sponge or your brush, like this. And then I'm going to heat set that. Okay. Now I'm going to focus on each toe individually. I think will be a lot better. So I'm going to start with the little toe. So just far too much on my brush there. Just join the little creases around that area there, and then pounce that off with your sponge. Make sure there's no excess hiding in the corners, and then we'll heat set that. And do that again. Do a little more, maybe another couple of layers. I think I'll stick with that for now and move on. So move on to the next toe. Just around the tip, and I'm going to turn it the other way so it's easier. Around here. And just dab that off with my brush. I'm actually going to do all 3 because they're fused together, so I might as well go around all 3. So again, along the base, in between each toe, and then along the top here. And you want to dab that off with your brush, and then heat set that. Repeat that. And then heat set. And go again. And go in with your brush just to lift out any excess that's there. Don't want any paint pools around. and then heat set that again. And we'll just do a couple more layers of that. And again, go in with your dry brush, pounce out the excess and heat set. Turn it around and have a look for yourself. See if you think they're okay. I'm going to do another layer, or maybe another one or two more layers on this one, and then we'll move on to the big toe. So in between, along the edge, and then along the top. And just pounce off any excess with your brush. And I'm just going to rub with my sponge if I can get in there. Not really, go back to my brush. And then heat set that. And then go back and do that again. Last time. This is very similar to the circle method that we used on the toes, but we're doing more of a square here. Circle will be good, but it's very difficult to do a circle in this tiny little area. But it's really up to you whether you circle or square, but it's the same sort of pattern that we're doing. It's the same sort of technique. So I'm going to go heat set that last layer there. And then we'll move on to the big toe, so this one here. And we're going to run our brush along the base here. There's usually lines on this area, so you don't have to guess. So along the baseline here, and then underneath the ball of the toe as well. And just again with your brush or your sponge, just pounce around that, and then heat set that. Again. Okay, and then heat set that. Around the base, and just pounce off anything you can get to, and then go in with your brush and then heat set that. And heat set. Heat set that. Okay, onto the front of the foot now. It's usually just as detailed as the base, sometimes even more. So we're going to start with the toes this time. I'm going to start with the big toe here. So, like with the fingers, just find any little creases you can find and just run your brush along them, like so. And then bring your sponge in and just pounce the excess off, and then heat set that. And go again with that. pounce off the excess and heat set. Again, we're staying away from the nails at this point in time. Just blemish that off and heat set that. Again, just keep going until you're happy with the colour. And heat set again. Keep going with that toe now. So, I think we're just about there. Okay, I think I'm done with the big toe there, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to these three that are fused together. So I'm just going to mix my paints because they've settled a little. And move on to the three here. So I'm going to go down the centre of the toes, in between the toes here, and around the base of the toes as well. The base of all three, and then I'm just going to go over any little creases that I can find on the toes, and then around this big line that's covering all three of them, like that. And then I'm just going to pounce off any excess, and I'm going to use my dry brush as well, just to go in between the toes so I don't have anything that's setting in the wrong place. So I'm going to heat set that now. And then I'm going to repeat that process. So reload my brush, go in between the three toes and around the base of them, across any little creases that are on the actual toes, and then around the big line at the base of all three. And then I'm going to pounce out the excess and come in with my brush, and just remove any bad areas, so any extra paint in the creases. And then I'm going to heat set that again. To repeat that process. So in between the toes, around the base of the toes, any little creases in the toes, and then around the big line that covers all three. I'm going to pounce the excess off and go in with my brush. Trying to lift that paint that's stuck in the creases, because it doesn't seem to be a smooth line in there, it seems to be quite rough, so it's just struggling to keep the paint out of it. So heat set that now. again in between the 3 toes, around the base, and any little creases the toes have, and then around the base of all 3. And then blemish with my sponge and just pounce out any excess with my dry brush. Like so. And then I'm going to heat set that. And keep doing that until I'm happy with the colour we're getting there. You can see the colours beginning to pink up. Like so. There we go, and then heat set that. Pounce off any excess with my dry sponge, my dry brush even. Like that, and then heat set. We're almost there, we've probably got 1, maybe 2 more layers to go here. Last one, and then heat set that. And then we can move on to the pinky toe. Reload my brush and just go over any little creases I can find, and in between the little toe and the toe next to it, and all of these little creases at the side. I'll use my sponge again and my dry brush just to get in between the toes, and then I'll heat set that. And the same again here. Okay, and heat set. Keep going with that until you're happy. will then be done with toes. Just give that a heat set now. Okay, now I'm going to move on up onto all the little creases across the top of the foot. We've already started doing them while we were doing the toes, but I'm just going to finish them off now. So reload your brush and then just follow all the little creases you can see over the top of the foot. And then just pounce the excess off and then heat set that. And again. Stay away from the ankle area at the minute, we'll do that next. I'm just going to focus on the top of the foot. Now, like with the back of the hand, the back of the foot, you don't want too much definition there, because you want to kind of the toes to stand out so much more. So I've only done a little bit, not too much, around the top of the foot. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the ankle area now. So just going to focus on a couple at a time. This, and then just pounce out any excess and then heat set. Do the same thing until you're happy with the colour. Keep going with those, probably another 2 or 3 layers on this section, and then we'll move on to the next bit of the ankle. Just pounce that out. And now I'm going to move on to the next section of the ankle. So, and just pounce off any excess that's there, and then heat set that. And keep going with that. Same thing as we've been doing before, just bringing your brush through the creases. Just adds a bit of colour to them. Just pounce the excess off and then heat set. just bringing this around the back here because I feel like it needs a bit of contouring. So do that and then heat set. Same thing there on the leg, so we're getting there, we're almost there. I'm just turning it around and checking for myself whether or not I like the colour we're getting. I'm just going to do a little bit more on around the top of the ankle here. Just don't feel it's picked it up quite as well. I'm just going to do one, maybe two more layers on that. Like so, and then heat set that. And just check, see what that looks like now. Okay, I think I'm quite happy with that. Yes. So we're going to move on up now, and we're just going to do all the little fat rolls and everything around the top, like we did with the arm. So again, we're going to start here with this fat roll here, and just paint along there and just pounce off like we've been doing, and heat set that. Going with that. Like so. I think that's dark enough, so I'm going to go ahead and move on up. So the next one we have on this limb is the knee crease. So same as we did the elbow crease and every other crease. So we just run our brush through the crease like so, right round and to the front here. And then we're just going to pounce off any excess that's there and just feather out the bit on the inside, and then we'll heat set that. Just going to keep going with that until we're happy with the colour. Like so, then just pounce off the excess. And that area, and then heat set that. More layers on here, I think, and then we'll move on to the next crease. Blemish that out, and then heat set again. leg and to the fork on the other side, and just pounce out the excess again, and heat set. And I'm going to take a step back and just check that I'm okay with that. I don't think it's dark enough, so I'm going to go over it again. So here goes. So reload your brush and paint around the crease. Blemish it out and then heat set that. And then one more time, I think, and blemish that out and then heat set that. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the fat rolls, and I'm going to use my bigger brush for this, my mixing brush, because this is a wider crease, so I feel the bigger brush will help a lot more and it'll be a lot more useful to us here. So same as ever, just run your brush through. It's just a bigger brush, that's all. Run your brush through and then create a triangle going up and a triangle going back this way as well. So just pounce that out and then heat set that. So bring your brush along and then bring the triangle out at that side and the triangle out at this side, and then pounce off the excess and feather that triangle out. Like so. And then you can heat set that again. And go again. Just going to keep going. We're almost there. This is the penultimate crease on this leg. So not much longer to go. So just pounce that out. Like so. And then heat set that. And then I'm going to do two or three more layers, I think. Just going through there and pounce that out as well and heat set again. Okay, I'm quite happy with how that's looking now, so I'm going to move on to, in fact no, I lied. I'm going to do one more layer, but only on the centre here, because I just feel it's not quite as deep as I would like in the middle. So just that one little bit on the middle and heat set that. Okay, now yes, that's a lot better. So I've heat set that now. You can see the difference between the two creases here and here. So I'm just going to go and do the last crease now. So same as before, using your bigger brush, just come round the crease like so. Far too much on my brush there. And then start out with the triangles across there. And just pounce the excess off here and feather out the triangles and then heat set. And again. Pounce all the excess off and heat set. this off, and then heat set that. And again. And heat set. Take a step back, have a look at it. I feel as though I'm going to do another layer on that last one, I think. Just like I did before, just in the middle like so. And just pounce that away and heat set that. Might do just one more. And pounce. And heat set. Okay, so that's all of the creases done on the leg. I've got the tops of the toes, the bottom of the toes, the ankles, behind the knee and the creases. Now sometimes on the knee there is some creases as well that you'll need to watch out for and do. So that is all there is on this one. So I'm happy with how that's turned out. Okay, so I'm moving on to the belly plate and the creases in that. Look, there's not too many on the belly plate here, not as many as on the head. So, same thing again, just following the lines with your brush and then pouncing out with your sponge and then heat setting with your gun. You don't want to make these too dark because you don't want it to look like the baby's skin's being cut with like a knife or something. You want them to be nice and natural and quite subtle, so you do have some depth to it, but it doesn't look like the crease is irritated. So just want to make sure you've got a nice balance there. See the side there compared to the other side, which has no paint on it. So just a couple of layers. Bear in mind that we haven't done any colouring on the stretch of the vinyl, so they will look a lot. They will stand out, shall we say, because the rest of the vinyl is still very, very pale. So don't worry about that. This is just the first layer, first sort of base coats before we start colouring the rest of the vinyl. So we've already got some depth into the veins. I didn't mean veins, by the way. I meant into the creases. We've got some depth to the creases, shall we say. This is just the first layer, as I've said before. We'll go back and darken the creases later on, so there'll be another stage of this later on. There might even be 3 stages. It really just depends. I like to break it up rather than doing it constantly because, as I said before, this layer is very, very repetitive and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, and it's a very, very long layer. So breaking it up into 2 or 3 different stages is definitely a good idea. because you can always go back and darken them later on, but if you make them a little bit too dark now, you know, you can't really go back and change that without stripping the kit back. So keep that in mind no matter what you're doing. You can always add more, but you can't take it off easily, so that's just a good moral to have in your head. Okay, so that's similar to, now I'm going to do another layer here. It's not quite dark enough actually. I'm just going to go outside of the creases a little bit. Again, going outside the creases helps to stop them looking as though the baby's been cut. Okay, I'm going to move down onto the belly button area. Mix my paints first. Okay, and just follow all the creases around. A little bit of fluff on there. If you see bits of fluff, just pick them off now rather than later. Now with the belly button, it's usually a bit of a dent in the vinyl there from, you know, that's sculpted into the vinyl. So I'm just going to go and just shade a little bit, so give a bit of shade to that. Can you see there how I've done that? And it just helps with the contouring in the vinyl. I don't want to go too high with that because you don't want a line going up the middle of the plate, but for a newborn size plate I would say maybe about 3/4 of an inch to an inch higher than the belly button is where I usually go to. Sometimes there's a very definite dip that you can put your shade with on a belly plate, but sometimes there's not. Sometimes there isn't even a dip. It's really up to you. Use your opinion whether or not, you know, it's all up to you whether or not you do this little bit here. Everything's up to you on this. There's no set way when reborning. It's all, you know, down to what you think and what's comfortable for you. Don't be afraid to go outside the box, you know. You just, you know, think a little and have a good play with your paints and, you know, see what works best for you. So again, I'm just going around that again and shading the dip again. I'm using my sponge to pounce that out. Again, I'm staying away from the umbilical cord here. We don't want to get any red on that. Okay, and we're going to heat set that again. But I'm not going to go all the way up, I'm just going to take it at the very base here so it looks a little deeper here, like so, and then just go around the edge of the umbilical cord again. If you don't have an umbilical cord sculpted on your kit, then just go around all the creases in the belly button, same way we've been doing everything else. Treat them like any other crease, and you'll be just fine. I think I'm going to do one more layer on that, and then we'll move on to the next creases. Again, sticking with just the bottom of the dip in the belly thing there. And then pounce out the excess. Like so. And heat set that. Okay, so I'm now gonna do I want to do another layer? I'm going to do one more layer, but I'm going to change it slightly. So just refill my brush, my smaller brush, and see there's a little, on this kit there's a little halo going around the umbilical cord. Ooh, can you see it goes all the way around? And I'm just going to go around with my brush at the very base of that, where it joins onto the belly, like so, and just make a little crease around it. Bounce out the excess there and heat set that. And I'm just going to do that a couple more times just to get a little bit more depth in that. I just feel I've lost a little bit by shading in the roll as well. So I'm just going to go around and make sure that's nice and shaded. Like so. Again, heat set that. Okay, I feel a lot better about that now. You can see there's a lot more definition to it. So I'm just going to move along to the creases below the belly button here. Same as any other creases, they're quite close together, so I'm just going to take a group of them at a time and heat set them all together. Same again. These are quite fine creases, so I'm not pressing hard with my brush at all. And then heat set that. I'm just going to refill my brush because my brush is running a bit low. Again, bounce it up and heat set. And the same again. And heat set. And then I think I'm going to do one more layer. Heat set that as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next set of creases now. Probably just going to do this one singular one along the front here. So. And heat set it. It seems to be picking up more on this side, so I'm just going to leave that side for this layer and just paint the other side of the crease so we can even it up a little bit. Right, so that's perfect. And we'll move on to the next creases now. I'm just going to do this section here. So again, still very fine, so not pressing very hard, barely anything on my brush. set. Again, making sure the vinyl isn't too hot. Just get too hot, then move on to a different section. I went a bit outside the line there, so I'm just taking it all off. I'm starting again. Okie dokie. Pounce that off and heat set. Now I feel this side has taken the paint more than this side, so same as I did before, I'm just going to leave that side in this layer and only paint this side just to even it up a little bit. That's better. Okay, so I'm going to mix my paints because they are getting a bit thin, not thin, they're beginning to settle. Reload my brush and then do the final set of creases. Actually, I think I'm going to divide this into two sides, so I'm going to do this section first and this section. You don't want to do too much at a time. Doing the same thing we've been doing for a while, just running the brush through the creases. Make sure you don't overload your brush or press too hard. Just pounce it out with your sponge and heat set. Set once more. And again, it's unevenly done, so I'm just going to go over this section just to darken it up a little bit. Do that once more. Pounce it out and get your gun and heat set again. And then moving on to the other side, just going to mix my paints because they're settling again. And heat set. set again. Maybe 2 more layers, and then that will be the belly plate done. I think that's fairly even, so I'm just going to leave it at the 1. And yeah, I think that's the belly plate done. Okay, so we're going to move along to the hand next. And same as before, same sort of creasing. I usually start on the palm of the hand, and then I just follow all the little creases around it. I usually only do the ones on the palm of the hand. I leave the fingers alone for now. Just make sure I've got everything. And then I very lightly pounce with my sponge, just once or twice. And then I heat set the paints that we've done so far. And I've just spotted on the side here, there's a little bit of paint pooling in one of the creases, so I'm just going to lift that out before I heat set, and then away we go. Okay, so that's the first layer done. I'm going to focus more on certain areas now rather than all of them. So I'm just going to start with the palm line here. All the big thick ones that go across, the main ones that go across the hand. So that's usually around the palm, and then there's usually 2 going across horizontally as well. And then I'm going to heat set that. Pounce out the excess and heat set. Checking that the vinyl's not too hot before you put the next layer on. Now when you're pouncing out, you don't want to do any rubbing, because you'll then bring it across what I call the highlight layers, so the tip of the rolls and things like that on the hands. You just want to dab, because you want to keep the paint in the same place that you've put it, and you don't want it smudging across areas you don't want it. I'm just going to mix my paints again because they're settling. Okay, and then heat set that. heat set that again. Okay. Oh, just dropped my brush. Okay, so you can see that's given the centre creases some definition. So I'm going to move on to the other creases now. Now there's lots of little tiny, like paper thin creases, which I like to say is more skin texture than creasing, and I tend to leave that alone on this first layer. I will probably go over it later on in the process when I come back to darken my creases even, but that's not, I don't always do it, it just depends on how I like the look of the vinyl. I'll show you what I mean later on, but for now we're just going to go over the bigger creases and leave the little skin texture ones alone. I'm going to start up here, I think. Okay, and just pants the excess off. And heat set that. And then repeat. If you have any questions about what I'm doing or what I've done previously or anything Reborn related, feel free to ask me. I'll be available for around about an hour after this session is posted for catch up and just answer any questions you may have. You can ask questions any time you wish. The response just may not be immediate, but I will answer your questions within a day or so. I'm just going to bounce that all out and heat set that. So again, I'm just going through with my brush all the little creases that I'm focusing on at the moment. My brush has barely any paint on it at all. Now with the creases at the bottom of the fingers, I'm just lifting it up above the crease and onto the finger, so it looks less like a cut and more like a roll. And I'll just pounce that out and heat set that. Now I'm just going to focus on that rather than the creases now, so I'm just going to bring it up slightly like so. So just up the finger slightly with my brush and just give it a good rub around like so, and then I make sure I pounce all of that out so there's nothing, no paint left in the creases. No extra paint. And I'm going to go in with my brush and just feather out any excess that I have here. Like so. And I'm going to heat set that. And move on to the fourth finger here that I seem to have missed out. Mixing my paints again as they're settling. do the same thing here that I've done with the rest of them. And just pounce out any excess there. And heat set that. Make sure the vinyl's not too hot again. So that's about the same as the other fingers now. So I'm going to move along to the, I don't even know what you call this bit, this part of the hand here. Just going to mix my paint again because it's settling. Too much on my brush there. And I'm just going to follow all the little creases on the ball of the hand here. And so, and just pounce off the excess there and heat set. And do that all again. Heat set that. Again, I'm not pressing very hard at all because these are very, very tiny creases. If you feel your brush is going over the creases, then feel free to use a smaller, thinner brush. There with this section. You see what I mean? There's lots and lots and lots of creases on the palm of the hand and the soles of the feet as well, and it just takes you a little while to do. You just need to find your patience and just keep going with it. Okay, so that's that section done. So we've just got this side of the palm here to do now. Move on to that. set that. Like so. And heat set that again. Just keep going with this. I'm just going to mix my paints as they're settling a little bit. And heat set that. And heat set again. One of the deeper lines at the top, because I feel like it's getting a little lost in all the little ones. Okay, so that's the palm of the hand done. I'm just going to go over this little section here around the wrist, and then we'll move up onto the fingers. So I'm just going to shade the whole of this little triangle area that's usually sculpted in around here, and just follow the creases round the wrist area, like so. Just pounce the excess off and heat set that. And just go around all the little creases you can find. So. And just keep going with that. And here we're just going to go into all the little dents and lines that are around the fingers and in between the fingers. If you have a clenched fist baby, you also want to go in between the fingers here, sort of area, to get some depth in there. This baby doesn't have clenched fists, so we don't need to do that. But we still need to go between the fingers though. And then moving up to the knuckle area, and just slightly draw your brush through each line on the knuckles and each finger. And I'm going to leave alone the nails because that's a separate part and I do those individually. Now, I'm just going to go through all exactly the same as the fingers. Just going through all the little contours you can find in between the fingers here. Just pounce them out with your sponge and then heat set them. Okay, and heat set that. And just blemish that out a little bit more and heat set that. Again, you just keep going until you're happy with how it looks. You must be doing about 6 or 7 layers here. But I don't count, I just go by what it looks like. And that's the thumb done. Okay, so we're just going to move on to the back of the hand. There's a few bumps and curves here that aren't exactly creases, but there is some definition there. The camera's sort of picking it up, but we're just going to go over that with our reds. And then there's a few very, very faint lines across the wrist here that we're going to go over, and then that will be the arm done. So for now, I'm just going to mix my paints again. And load my small brush and just feeling around and having a look for them. So there's one that goes down here and there's one on that side as well. So I'm just going to do one layer across there and pounce that out like so. And there's little contours across the knuckle area like so. Just pounce that out and heat set that. And I think I'll do one more layer. I don't want this to be very prominent, it's just giving a little bit of help, a little bit of background, not too much at all, just a little bit here and there. That all out. Feathering more than pouncing here because it's a contour rather than a crease, so just feather that out and heat set that. Okay, can you see a difference there? It's a little bit more prominent, but not in your face. I think that looks quite nice. Okay, now turning it, you want to turn it around and just see if you can see any more contours because it may be visible in a different kind of light. I think I've missed one here, so I'm just going to go ahead and paint that in and heat set that. And that's fine for me. Okay, so the last thing is just to go over the little creases that are across the wrist here. So like we've been doing, I'm just going to bring my brush through them like so. All the little creases that I can find, nothing too major, and just pounce them out. Again, I don't want these to be major rolls because the wrist is bent forward, so you have less, you won't have any fat rolls there, shall we say. I just want to acknowledge the fact that they are there, but I don't want to make them overly obvious. So I might just do one more layer. Oh dear, oh dearie, dearie, dear. We have some thick paint on the end of my brush somehow. So I'm just going to mix my paint with that brush. Make sure there's no excess on there. No, there isn't. Okay. And just grab my wipe. Just wipe that off my finger. Okay, so I'm just going to do one more layer over those tiny little creases and pounce that off. I'm going to drag my almost feather, more of a pounce but a little bit of a feathering there because I just want to take it off a little bit more. So that's perfect, so I'm going to heat set that. And then we're going to move in with the elbow area. So I'm going to follow it from one end to the other, like so. And I'm just going to go through all the creases that are around the top of the arm. Same way, just pulling my brush through the lines, following the lines. I'm not doing any shaping work here at the moment, we're just following the lines. Again, I'm just using my sponge to blot off the excess. I'm not rubbing, I'm up, down, no feathering here. And then that is all the creases on this hand done. So it took a while, but I'm very, very pleased with the results. Definitely worth the time. As you can see, total transformation on the hands. Turn them the other way, and on the fingers, and on the creases around the elbows and everything like that. Big, big difference. So very, very happy with how that's gone. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing on this arm, and then we can move on to the next stage.